Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest version of Tales from Outer Space, where I take an HFY story from somewhere around the internet and read it aloud for your enjoyment. All the relevant links are down below. Like, subscribe, and all that YouTube comf to help this video and channel grow. Anyways, as always, I hope that you enjoy. I would just like to thank the following Tier 5 patrons and channel members for supporting the channel: Datamagnet and Bob the Dragon. Thank you again. And now, on to the story. Story number 1. Colors, written by Operation Technician. Every race has colors. Not visible colors, not ones that a mind can define as blue or green, or even any frequency of light outside of the visual spectrum of most species. A color is a feeling, an effect that a being has on its surroundings. We built eyes, computer-controlled lenses that visualize these effects as colors, based on everything known about being observed. We, the gray, are the color of precious metal, gold and silver, and the color of power, control, and wisdom. Understandable, we evolved to rule over everything we create, and later to rule over those we meet. The makers evolved to create in order to survive, to improvise and adapt. A brown and yellow color of creation. The Hacksaw, an artificial race with a glamorous blue aura of color of wisdom and intelligence, logic and understanding. The Blair, the hive species of warriors raised by their dreadful will to fight every minute of every day just to survive, illuminated by red color. The Purple Tall, capable of adapting to the minds of the alien species and hearing their very thoughts and feelings. But we do not wear eyes anymore. Now the eyes make us blind, for all we see now is the void of space itself, the pitch black smog flowing from the very ground we walk on. We cannot understand how the species managed to reach space. Every action of their existence was one of destruction, not fighting. Nothing like the Red Black warriors. These beings came with the very color of entropy in their hands. Their ships terrified us. These ships moved on destruction, were powered by destruction, and constructed for little more than destruction. They were built, yes, but they were built by destroying resources, and in their destruction turning them into what was needed. We thought that we had mastered war, that the galaxy was ours, as dispersed as we were, and that eventually every race in it would heed our rule. The beings of the void, however, had no need for war or rules. The first time, they stood before our worlds and offered the ultimatum that we could not agree to. The second time, our worlds burned, but not in war. They burned in destruction, pure and uncontrolled, with weapons of unrestrained as the stars themselves. Our own tools designed not to harm the worlds that they were used on, to be safe for everything but the intended target, at ranges that allowed time to close and decide on strategy, were as ineffective as toothpicks against steel when it came to fighting the warships of the color of void. And when our last planet remained, the darkness filled the skies above us. They asked a second time for our surrender, and every species, on their own, agreed. The first of us witnessed the building of the rings we live on now. We saw as they crashed planets together, and in the wake of those collisions extracted the resources to build the rings around a black hole that they mined for power, building an artificial star around it to light the rings. We could not comprehend how this color, this destructive existence, could exist and survive without destroying itself. But then, the most curious of us began approaching the destroyers building the rings. They were thought suicidal, of course, for what they would come to meeting death itself. We learned that death was not the worst of options. The deviants returned all alive, but many had spots in their brilliant color, spots of darkness, and the spots grew with every cycle. The darkness, we saw, was an infection, one that consumed colors, and we feared the darkness even more. Those that were turned dark failed to spread it, but they had been changed in ways we could not understand. In their eyes, minds, souls, we saw only the void. I was in the second wave of deviance. I was, perhaps, curious. Perhaps I had given up on existence. I found myself next to one of them. I disabled my eyes as I entered the zone where they worked, just to be able to see through the black of their presence. I spent several cycles amongst the beings, and every moment had me in a confused frenzy. I realized at first that the creatures could think, whereas before I was convinced that no being with such a purity in its existence could do anything but what its color indicated. Destruction, in this case. Now I realized that these creatures could understand, learn, and make decisions that usually made sense. But they could do much more than that. Every one of them, it seemed, had the capability to take control of any number of others, in a permanent structure of employment and command. At the same time, each creature could understand another one on a level that airwaves could not possibly carry. Often, they functioned as a group without so much as a word, somehow knowing what the other was going to do. Their ways of creation always involved destruction rather than transmutation or manipulation. But, incredibly enough, the destruction was so organized that it could build in ways that made the few makers that I witnessed helping around impressed beyond signals. And then I understood. I saw what all the deviants saw as they turned to darkness. Each human was capable of more than one way of existence, where we, in our fallen empire, employed species in areas that they were best at and nothing else. The humans only had themselves to lean on. The black that surrounded them and blinded us was not a pure color. It was many in one, merging in to confuse the eyes into creating a black aura around the beings and everything they made. And then another idea was presented to me by the humans. I too could do more than rule and control. My race was no longer in command and never would be. And I realized that, as incredible as it sounded, I too could create. I too could imagine and create ideas with my mind. I too could build and destroy, both as the makers and Blair warriors. I could understand species with some practice and experience, and just like the tall were raised to. And in my color, a dark spot expanded, consuming my brilliant gold and silver. End of story. Story number 2. Watching from the Shadows, written by Hidden Fox. Despite its name, the Watcher-class exploration vessel was not primarily visual. It had a large amount of cameras, and had a particularly powerful telescope to be fair, but it was built for something else. Like many leaps in technology, the Watchers were built for war, but not these ones. Watchers had originally been built under different circumstances, as an electronic warfare ship. The Watchers had stripped away all weapons, firing computers, and other unnecessary military features, replacing them with cameras, telescopes, and cloaking. However, the Watchers had kept the powerful electronic warfare system. In fact, it had been upgraded. Why would such a ship be made? Why waste cloaking on an explorer? Why? It's because the Watchers are not explorers. A better word would be spies. The United Terran States knew that other life existed. They had evidence that those other species had created an intergalactic government. And boy, were they scared. How did aliens think, speak, act? And so they sent Watchers. And that is why above the ash-swirled homeworld of the Kirkai, the Pisgloria rested. Hey Luke, how long until the translator is done? Postmate Lena leaned into the tech bay. Let me check. Xeno-linguistical specialist Luke Smith was a fantastic linguist, but he also choked up among strangers. So he made translators, and bloody good ones at that. It should be done in a few minutes. It'll be done before your tea is, Luke gestured to one of the several screens in front of him. How did you know I was making tea? It's 3:23 ship time, Lena. You do this every day, and I put the honey in the cupboard. Oh. Okay then. I'll be back in a moment. Make sure you add the translator to the ship's computer. Aye. The translator had some technical issues, so it had been delayed. It was now 7:42 p.m. ship time, and the captain was waking up for the morning. Does anyone have any coffee? Captain Leonard de Lanara entered the bridge, looking totally unfit to lead. Disheveled and not entirely awake, he really stumbled onto the deck. The captain was very, very good at his job. He just preferred to sleep for most of it. Oh, Captain, we just got the translator online. The pilot of the Piz Gloria was also the newest member of the admittedly small crew. Lbry Lakowski was the most energetic of the crew. Leonard said something that sounded like coffee, but no one was too sure. There's some in the galley, sir. Lbry, like always, was beaming. Leonard mumbled something else and shuffled off the bridge. By the time he was awake and headed back to the bridge, which were 2 different times, the mood had visibly, audibly, and somehow olfactorily changed. The crew, all a dozen, minus Leonard, were staring at the screens, with facial expressions ranging from somber to grief. What happened? You guys okay? Luke was the only person to respond. It's the ash, sir. It's not natural. What? They're dying, sir. It's a mass extinction. The Kolthai, the sentient species that inhabited Kolkai, had recently joined the Galactic Senate. A galactic rule that was put in place after too many tragedies was about to cause another. The Kolthai were currently going through an uplifting process. They couldn't defend themselves against some of the older species. So, for 25 Galactic Senate cycles, no other species was allowed on the planet of Kurkai. The issue with this rule were being seen now. A supervolcano that the Kurkai somehow didn't know about had erupted near the capital city. The eruption threw thousands of tons of ash into the air, blocking the sun and creating an artificial winter. It had also decapitated the Kolthai government, killing most of the leaders and destroying the main communications channels. Within years, almost all planetary Kurthai would die, and even more of the planet's natural environment. And no one was allowed to help. An opportunity presented itself, and humanity took it. With result, the entirety of the United Terran States Navy bore down on the planet of Kurkai. Millions of soldiers were packed into the hulls of troop transports, billions of kilos of gear. Jumping out of light speed en masse, the rudimentary sensors of the Kurthai had sensed this massive fleet arrive just outside the planet's gravity well. Hundreds and hundreds of ships formed up and burned hard towards Kurkai. This fleet was seen by the rest of the galaxy, and they mourned for their friends that they might have made. The black and grey troop ships opened, disgorging thousands of white dropships. They charged right into the storm of ash and dust. They breached the atmosphere, flying as fast as they could over the most populous areas. Their targets in range, they activated their payloads. Instead of missiles flying, searchlights lit up the ground. Instead of guns firing, speakers blared. The same message was repeated across the planet. We are humanity. We come in peace. We are humanity. We bring aid. Repeated in the language of the Kolthai. The thousands of dropships, each speaking with the voice of humanity. As the dropships landed, they released thousands of soldiers and millions more volunteers. Instead of an invasion, they brought aid. Doors marked with the Kolthai glyph of peace and help released doctors, nurses, rescue workers, and anyone else who wanted to help. They brought food and medicine, all compatible. Hastily modified corvettes plunged into the atmosphere, turbines whirring, filtering the ash from the air. Armored recovery vehicles were used to clear rubble. Helicopters, previously armed with missiles, carried the hurt to hospitals. Shuttles brought hundreds of clergy, each trained in the rituals and rites of the Kolthai religions. And coffins. Oh, so many coffins. Each one was handmade according to the religion of the Kurthai, and blessed in the same languages. And above 100 worlds in 100 languages, watchers uncloaked and declared, "We are humanity. We come in peace." End of story. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed, and if you do, please consider supporting the author, even by popping over and leaving a thumbs up or a nice comment, just to show your appreciation for the story. However, if you wish to support this channel, there are links down below which will help immensely. I will see you all in the next one, and until then, I hope that you have a fantastic day. Cheers.